I am a racist. Now, whether you're a black person, a white person, or a person of another ethnic minority hearing this probably doesn't sit quite well with you. Doesn't with me either. I don't see myself as a racist. Most white people don't see themselves as racist. And that's mostly because we are taught that racism is a morally bad thing. So any person in their right mind will of course reject that label. We're also told that racism is a mindset, that someone's racist when they consciously think and believe that they are superior to non-white people for being white, and when they act in line with that mindset by, for example, not renting to black people, or by calling black people the N-word or gollywog or whatever. And of course, most people don't identify with that sort of definition. They go, well, I don't think that way. I don't act that way. In fact, I think it's wrong for someone to act that way. And if I saw that, I would call it out. So because of that, a lot of white people feel that racism has nothing to do with them, because they're not actively contributing to racism happening. And that's part of why it's still inconceivable for a lot of white people that they have anything to do with racism, that there's even the slightest link between them and racism. You're trying to tell me I enable racism? What? I'm not doing anything. I'm not a bad person. But here's the thing. Like it or not, as a white person, you and I are part of a racist system in Western society, for sure. And we are most likely upholding this system in ways that we aren't even aware of. We got to understand that the system needs individual acts of racism so that we white people have something to check ourselves against and go, well, that's not me. That's racism. That's over there. And I'm over here. Because that way then, systemic racism can continue to play out in more complex and less obvious ways. Because we white people are more preoccupied with distancing ourselves from individual racism than with actual social justice. Let's have a look at corporate UK. Did you know that black individuals represent a 22.3% of undergrad students, but only 10% of entry-level employees within 6 months of graduation, and only 5% of senior-level positions? Quite a mismatch, right? So black people are disproportionately present in business in the UK. In fact, they're effectively underrepresented. And that's a prime example of systemic racism. It's injustice happening to a particular group in society right under our noses, with us white people being blind towards it and being blinded by our privilege, because we wrongly assume that the opportunities we have are universally available equally to everyone else. And that's not the case. Another example of this is the hashtag All Lives Matter, which I won't go into in this video. We white people have got to understand that whilst, yes, we aren't actively opting into any club just by being born white, we nevertheless receive the rewards that come with being white, and that is what sits at the core of systemic racism. And this is why we need to redefine racism. Racism isn't just about we white people actively do or don't do. It's as much about what we white people passively accept about ourselves and our position in society. It's not about us individually only, it's about how we contribute to an unjust system through our ignorance and denial, through not acknowledging our privileges and through not acknowledging the realities of Black people and other ethnic minorities. And it's not about blame, because it's of course no one's fault what system they're being born into. But right now we live in a moment in time in history where there are no longer any excuses. We all have a responsibility to educate ourselves about our position in society, to learn about the realities of other groups in the society we live in, and to learn about how my reality relates to theirs. The systemic nature of racism needs to be much more common understanding, because then we white people would feel less defensive on an individual level and would take the possibility that we're somehow connected with racism happening less personal. And that in turn would enable and make space for real change. Because as long as we white people feel this barrier towards relating or even identifying with racism, we won't acknowledge our part in it. And that, however, is really the first step towards real change. It's the first and inevitable step towards real change. Denial means stopping any possibility of progress. I mean, I get it. It can be difficult. I've noticed that tendency in myself too. Part of me wants to be as woke as possible so that I don't have to identify with those horrible and shameful things over there. But I realized it's not really possible. I can't do this. I've started to become aware of moments of my own unconscious bias. And when I catch myself in those split seconds, it's like, whoa, where does that come from? I don't really think like that. But you see, that's what we got to do. We have to get over ourselves and ask those kinds of questions. Because unfortunately, it's not a question of whether we white people are or aren't racist. Like Robin DiAngelo states in White Fragility, that is a given. We need to accept that being born into a racist system will necessarily leave its traces through socialization and through no fault of our own. It doesn't make us bad people. But I guess if we want to be good people, then we need to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about it? Are we willing to look at where unconscious biases within ourselves stem from? Are we willing to look at how we help sustain an unjust system, a racist system? Are we willing to look at how we can help dismantle it instead? Because only then we can move from being not a racist to starting to be anti-racist. And that needs to be the real goal.